The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you with all the top stories from around the globe. Let's begin with our big focus. Today marks exactly 4 months since the horrific terror attacks carried out by Hamas on Israeli soil and the nightmarish Israel-Hamas war that erupted in the immediate aftermath. Some 1,200 people were killed by Hamas on the 7th of October in southern Israel, and around 250 were taken hostage. The war that was launched on Gaza by Israeli forces and which has now gone on for 4 months has killed over 27,500 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. The United Nations has said at least 60% of Gaza Strip has been flattened, with most of the infrastructure ruined and a huge proportion of the population displaced and staring at possible starvation and disease, in addition to all the death and destruction. 4 months into the war, we're asking, is there any end in sight to the devastating conflict? Could a ceasefire take effect any time in the foreseeable future? Reports now suggest that Hamas has proposed a ceasefire plan that would quiet the guns in Gaza for 4.5 months, leading to an end to the war. This comes in response to a proposal that was sent last week by Qatari and Egyptian mediators and backed by the United States and Israel. Now, according to the draft document, the Hamas counter-proposal envisions 3 phases of a ceasefire lasting 45 days each. The proposed deal would see Hamas exchange the remaining Israeli hostages who they captured on the 7th of October for Palestinian prisoners. The reconstruction of Gaza would begin. Israeli forces would completely withdraw from the Strip, and the bodies and remains of those killed in the war would be exchanged between the two sides. Also, according to the Hamas counter-proposal, all Israeli women hostages, men under 19, the elderly and sick would be released during the 45-day phase, the first phase, in exchange for the release of Palestinian women and children from Israeli jails. The remaining male hostages would be released during the second phase, and remains of the dead would be exchanged in the third phase. By the end of the third phase, Hamas would expect the two sides to have reached an agreement to end the war. Hamas has also stated that it wishes to see the release of 1,500 prisoners, a third of whom it wants to select from a list of Palestinians who have been handed life sentences by Israel. The truce would also increase the flow of food and other aid to Gaza's desperate civilians who are facing hunger and dire shortage of basic supplies. Hamas has also proposed that the guarantors of the agreement would be Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, Russia and the United Nations. It does not include the United States among the guarantors. But let's not forget, Israel has repeatedly stated it will not withdraw its troops from Gaza until it achieves a complete victory over Hamas. A Hamas official has been quoted as saying the group would not allow any hostage release without guarantees that the war would come to an end and Israeli forces would exit Gaza. Now, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrived in Israel on Tuesday after meeting leaders of the mediators, Qatar and Egypt, in the most serious diplomatic push so far aimed at reaching an extended truce. However, so far only the Israeli proposal has been discussed. Blinken has said the United States is reviewing Hamas's response, as is Israel's Foreign Intelligence Service. Meanwhile, amidst the fierce ongoing fighting in Gaza, aid workers have raised concerns over any expanded Israeli military operation south towards Rafah, which is next to the Egyptian border. Here, satellite images show a makeshift tent city estimated to house more than 1 million civilians who've been displaced by the war. Israel's military has said 31 of the remaining hostages in Gaza have been pronounced dead. Israel previously said that 136 hostages were still in Gaza after 110 were freed under a 7-day truce in the month of November. The Wall Street Journal has reported that as many as 50 hostages could be dead, leaving about 80 hostages alive.
There is some movement, and I don't want to, well, maybe choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas, but it seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is. There's a continuing negotiation right now.
So together with Qatar and Egypt, we put forward, as you know, a serious proposal that was aimed at not simply repeating the previous agreement, but expanding it. As the Prime Minister just said, Hamas responded tonight. We're reviewing that response now, and I'll be discussing it with the government of Israel tomorrow. There's still a lot of work to be done, but we continue to believe that an agreement is possible and indeed essential, and we will continue to work relentlessly to achieve it. We're also determined to use any pause to continue to pave a diplomatic path forward to a just and lasting peace and security for the region. That is the best way to ensure that October 7th and the tragic loss of life by Israelis and Palestinians is not repeated. The best path forward, the most effective path forward right now to get an extended period of calm and to work toward an end to the conflict is through an agreement on the hostages. And that's what we're intensely focused on with our partners here in Qatar, Egypt, working with Israel. And of course, now that we have the response from Hamas to the proposal that was put on the table a week or so ago, we're going to be very intensely focused on that. And again, that offers the prospect of extended calm, hostages out, more assistance in. That would clearly be beneficial to everyone, and I think that offers the best path forward. But there's a lot of work to be done to achieve it. We're very focused on doing that work.
So here's what I'll say, and Secretary Blinken spoke to this, and as the President said today as well, Hamas has responded to the framework of a hostage deal. This is as we speak towards a hostage deal. The United States is going to review that response. There's still a lot of work to be done here before we have a deal. So we are not going to get in the way of that. It's very, well, look, they have a deal. They have responded to a framework hostage deal. We think that's actually incredibly important. We're going to review that response. Look, there's a lot of work to be done here. We're going to be really, really careful. These are sensitive negotiations. As you know, this is a negotiation process that has been also led by Qatar and also Egypt.
Unfortunately, we lost valuable time in dismantling Hamas's rule, especially in the north of the Strip, through feet dragging. Now we must urgently promote a framework by which food and humanitarian aid are delivered to Gaza through international actors that have no ties to Hamas, unlike UNRWA or other groups, even if it may require halting or decreasing aid amounts, even if we decide to allow the entry of trucks from the north of the Strip and not the south. The Israeli army is supporting the families of the hostages in these complex and difficult days, and our representatives deliver to the families all the authenticated information about their loved ones. Accordingly, we have informed 31 families that their captured loved ones are no longer among the living, and that we have pronounced them dead. And to the rest of the families, we have informed them with the information we have about their fate and conditions. We are continuing the fight to reach the terms and have all the hostages returned home. This is a moral obligation, national obligation, and international obligation. And this is our compass, and this is how we will continue operating.
4 months into the war, where do things stand? Are we likely to see a ceasefire taking effect anytime soon? I am joined on Global Lens tonight to discuss all those questions by Anat Bernstein. She is the president of the Israel-Asia Chamber of Commerce. Lev Aaron, Israeli journalist and columnist, is also with us, as is Ambassador Suresh Goyal, former Indian diplomat. A warm welcome to all my guests. I need to take a quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go anywhere. We will start this conversation on the other side.
जब हम करेंगे तो पता लग ही जाएगा सलमान खान का करेंगे मारेंगे यहीं जोधपुर में मारेंगे तो पता लग जाएगा
This is someone who is sitting inside our jails and is still very obviously and openly running and possibly the largest organized criminal operation in the country.
Student organization of Punjab University में सोपूगा acting president type भी रहा है.
He was a troublemaker, getting into fights with people, not coming to the class.
As on date, it appears that Lawrence gang is the most important, the prominent gang. Gangs here in Punjab, they are intimidated.
Today, he's India's most dangerous gangster, and India's prisons are apparently no bar to how Bishnoi runs India's largest criminal empire.
News is now content. Just stream it. Download the world's first news OTT, News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the Israel-Hamas war, which today has completed 4 months. Let me now go straight across to our guests. Anat Bernstein joins me from Israel. Anat, welcome back to Global Lens. As always, great to have you on the show. Let me begin by asking you the most fundamental question. 4 months into this war, how many of its stated objectives do you believe Israel has managed to achieve? And the one question that's uppermost in everyone's mind is simply this: are we likely to see Israel and Hamas reach a ceasefire agreement in the next few days or weeks? Because that's what the entire world is hoping to see, and also perhaps that is the only way we're going to see the hostages, the remaining hostages, being released.
Good evening, Neha. Good to see you. Good to be here again. I'll start with your second question about whether it will happen, and I'm of the opinion that a ceasefire and a truce with Hamas will happen. The fact that there is an offer on the table means that Hamas is considering, let's say, a hostage release pact with Israel. And of course, this is just a negotiation. So this is the first part. And tomorrow there is another round of discussion in Cairo, in Egypt, and I'm sure that eventually they'll reach an agreement. One point that needs to be stressed is the hostage families, which put a lot of pressure in Israel. So on one hand, the objective of this war was to eliminate, as we say, Hamas. And the second one was, of course, releasing the hostages. I think that it's more realistic now to at least achieve one goal, which is release of the hostages. I don't think that we have, and as IDF spokesperson said, Hagari said, we have a moral obligation. And the moral obligation is in a very substantial obligation of the Israeli people, of the Israeli government, to the hostages families, and to the entire nation. So if we are able to release the hostages, it will be achieving a main goal of this war. 4 months, our nation is 75, 76 years old, and we believe that, I believe that waiting 4 months or 5 months, another 5 months is not an issue, as long as we are able to get the hostages And as you rightly said, the 136 out of them, we assume from Reuters and from other sources that about 50 are already dead, which means that if we wait longer, we will lose more hostages and we cannot afford it. So I hope that this agreement will progress into a concrete agreement. Unfortunately, we will have to reach some ceasefire. According to this pact, we will release over 1,000 prisoners, which we say they are with blood on their hands. Many of them have life imprisonment, which means that they were engaged in terror attacks that kill people. But still, it's better to have the hostages back, regain, I would say, trust of the people in the government, because we need those hostages back. And then we will have to try to reach, of course, a peace will be the best thing. But unfortunately, knowing that Hamas is leading Gaza, I'm a bit skeptical that reaching a peace agreement with them is possible. I mean, the leader of Hamas need to go out of Gaza, and then we can really talk. I wouldn't say business, but we can talk peace. That's how I view the situation.
Okay. Let me go across to Lev Aaron now. Lev, you know, I have already outlined the main provisions of this proposed ceasefire agreement that has been put forth by Hamas as a counter proposal to Israel's own ceasefire deal. Now, it will be evaluated, I'm sure, by the Israelis and the Americans. But here lies the problem. While I think it would be safe to assume that both sides desperately need a ceasefire, the Palestinians need some respite. Too many people have died in Gaza. And on the other hand, Israel needs to bring home the remaining hostages. If news reports are to be believed, as many as 50 of them are already dead. Israel does not want to lose more. But here lies the trouble. Israel has said time and again, it will not withdraw its troops from Gaza until a complete victory has been achieved over Hamas. Hamas, on the other hand, it seems, is hell-bent on not allowing any further hostages to be released without guarantees that the war will end and that the Israeli forces will exit Gaza. How do you believe the two sides can find a meeting ground with such deeply entrenched positions on either side?
Thank you for inviting me. I think it is a very good question, because the main reason that so many people in Israel say, okay, let's go for a deal with Hamas, is because we believe that with valorization of jihad among Hamas, we can meet what they demand, because anyway, they will try to attack us again. And once they attack us again, and there are no hostages in Gaza, then we can wage a real war against Hamas. Because right now, because of the hostages, the war is dragging. So many things that IDF knows to do, IDF cannot do because of the hostages. So all those who say, look, we should go for a deal with Hamas, what they really mean is that valorization of jihad among Hamas is too strong. And anyway, in the future, there will be a final war between Israel and Hamas. And therefore, now the top priority of Israel should be releasing the hostages and wait for Hamas to make a mistake and attack Israel again.
Okay, but you know, that may very well mean that not just thousands of innocent Palestinians, but even the remaining hostages could end up as collateral damage. Is that a price that Israel is willing to pay? Because one of the stated objectives of this war from the very start was the safe return of all the hostages, and we know that's not going to happen now because almost 50 of them are already dead. Let me bring in our Indian guest, Ambassador Suresh Goyal. Ambassador Goyal, I want to put the same two fundamental questions to you. In your assessment, 4 months into this war, how many of its stated objectives has Israel really managed to achieve, all the rhetoric aside? And two, do you see the two sides being able to arrive at a ceasefire agreement anytime in the foreseeable future? Because even though both sides need it, the well-entrenched positions on both sides seem to be making it virtually impossible.
Neha, I wish I could answer your questions in the same simple manner that you put the questions to me. I say simple basically because they sound simple, they sound straightforward. But the very fact that so far, even after 4 months, there has been no solution, there has been no holding of ceasefire, clearly indicates the situation is much more complex than what anybody could imagine it to be. Let me now break it down into some steps, really. Number one, the very fact that Israel has received the ceasefire proposal, how much ever complicated and difficult it can be, from Hamas, does indicate that they know that the solution, security solution they seek in Hamas, in Gaza, may not be possible unless they are prepared to sacrifice lives of more hostages. So therefore, the acceptance to be able to talk is number one thing. I think it's a very welcome step, number one. Number two, both Hamas and Israel want to proceed further, provided they get the most of what they want. But more important than that are the security guarantees. Who is going to guarantee that whatever commitments are made by either Hamas or Israel are adhered to, are fulfilled? I think that is where the USA comes. This is the election year, and there is a lot at stake for Joe Biden during the election. And therefore, I think Joe Biden himself will have a lot to really do in terms of being able to ensure that this prevails. Even though there are Jewish lobbies in the USA holding the purse strings, I think here three countries, three sides have a lot of interest in ensuring that finally if not the peace, at least the war ends. Now we come to the nitty-gritty of it all, really. If you look at what Hamas has offered, what happens to Israel's long-term security? Will Israel be able to maintain some kind of a security presence in Gaza? There is no indication of that. Will Hamas be able to control and administer Gaza? There is no indication of that. And therefore, I say that in terms of the nitty-gritty of the agreement, there is such a lot that is missing from what I have read. Maybe there is more, and clearly there must be more, and they will both negotiate. But important thing is, will Israel be able to renege or come down on its assurance of a total security control in Gaza?
Ambassador Goel, may I please come in for just a moment? My apologies for interrupting you. Yes. But you know, when you say that certain important elements seem to be missing from this proposed ceasefire agreement, my counter argument to that would be that it is a given that Hamas would want to be allowed to continue governing the Gaza Strip, something which Netanyahu and his ministers have said time and again is not acceptable to them, and therefore that is likely to continue being a sticking point, as are many other issues.
Absolutely. That is the reason I said that the USA role becomes equally, in fact, even more important. And I think the USA will be prepared to play that role because this is the election year. But whether Israel will accept it or not is yet to be seen. And therefore, I said, I wish I could answer your questions because there are so many things which we will know only as the time passes. And let us see how Israel reacts to these proposals tomorrow. Neha. I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer your questions, but that is as far.
No, I completely understand, sir. None of us
Yes.
have a crystal ball. These are very
Yes.
complex issues. Even the parties involved have no idea how this war is going to eventually
Absolutely.
pan out, how it's going to end. We're all hoping and praying to see an end to it soon. But we don't know just how things are going to unfold over the next few days, weeks or months. Nobody even knows how much longer this war could last. I need to take another quick break here on Global Lens. Don't go away. Lots more on the other side. We'll continue this conversation.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
$20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
वर्ष 2070 तक भारत नेट जीरो का लक्ष्य हासिल करेगा.
There's certainly a wall of capital coming into the clean tech, climate tech space, not just in India but across the world.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Bangalore traffic is an example of something that has gone wrong with our system.
We have more than 50 flyovers in Bangalore city. If flyover is a solution to traffic problem, Bangalore should not have traffic problem.
According to TomTom Traffic Index 2022, Bangalore is ranked as the second worst city in the world when it comes to traffic.
The speed limit at the ORR is 80 kilometers per hour, but our vehicle has only moved 10 kilometers per hour.
What Bangalore needs is a surgery, but what we have been offered repeatedly are band-aids.
Only on the world's first news OTT. News9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Welcome back. You're watching Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and we're discussing the Israel-Hamas war and whether there could be a ceasefire in Gaza soon. All right, let me go back to Anat at this point. Anat, Ambassador Goyal, of course, has made an important point that, it may all boil down to whether Israel and Hamas can reach some sort of an agreement on a post-war scenario. We know what the stated positions are. Israel says Hamas cannot be in power anymore, all the leaders have to leave, and we will hand over Gaza to, a new entity or a set of entities which are going to govern this strip. Hamas, on the other hand, is very clear it wants to be allowed to continue governing Gaza. Also, Ambassador Goyal says that given that there are so many sticking points as these talks go on, the United States will play a very crucial role in achieving any sort of ceasefire agreement that we may see in the coming days, especially given the fact that the US goes to elections this year and President Biden is under tremendous pressure even from his own supporters over his support to Israel's war in Gaza. What kind of a role do you believe President Biden can play? Do you believe ultimately it will take the UN's intervention to secure a ceasefire? And the biggest question of them all, what happens once, let's say, the war does come to an end? Who governs Gaza?
So, lots of questions. As you said, we don't have a crystal ball, but we have the history book. So from the history, we can learn the future. Talking about President Biden is very brave because knowing that he is under election year, he still continues to support Israel and continue to condemn Hamas and clearly say that Hamas cannot stay in Gaza. Hamas wants to stay in Gaza, of course, it's clear. The point is that on same time, they say, and they haven't retrieved from their own statement that they'll do it again. So how can we agree for them to stay there, knowing the threat that we are under? So in the very near future, Hamas probably will stay there, but there should be some long-term plan, some coalition, and it's not within those 4 or 5 months. As the spokesperson or the press secretary of the White House said, there are a lot of details to be planned. There is a lot of work, and US will play a crucial role in this, in addition to Qatar and Russia and Egypt. But Hamas cannot stay in Gaza if it's up to Israel, of course, because they are continuing to be a threat. And we have some experience with Hamas. It's not the first operation and not the second operation that we reached an understanding with them. And eventually they broke the ceasefire and launched rockets on Israel. So we don't believe them. There will not be trust built between Israel and Hamas. It will not happen. It cannot happen. There should be a major change in the management of Gaza. I'm again skeptical about the UN role. UN played, I would say, a counter positive effect on the situation, looking at their organization in Gaza, UNRWA, that now they understand, and there are allegations against UNRWA, that they actually work for Hamas instead of working towards the peace in the region and in Gaza, of course. So from the UN, I'm not expecting much, definitely from the US. And I hope that President Biden will continue his brave path and to support Israel and eventually to take Hamas out of Gaza.
Okay, let me take this to Lev Aaron. Lev, of course, Anat is very hopeful that President Biden could play a very important and constructive role in all of this. There are many, in fact, around the world who believe that perhaps only the United States can bring this war to an end. Of course, your controversial far-right minister Ben Gvir made one of his controversial statements recently when he actually attacked Biden, saying that he's hindering Israel's war efforts and that if Trump was the president, it would have been far more beneficial for Israel. I'm guessing that would not have amused President Biden, who has in many ways stuck his neck out by offering unqualified support to Israel. But more importantly, do you believe that President Biden can help the two sides in arriving at a ceasefire agreement and bringing this war to an end? And also, as the ambassador pointed out, the fact that the proposals that are currently under consideration are silent on the post-war scenario. What should be read into that?
Okay, so first of all, yes, we have a bunch of counterproductive clowns in our government, and you have mentioned one of them. and they're doing a lot of damage. They are doing it. Their children are doing it, and even if I'm an Israeli, I don't want to defend it. I think they are counterproductive, and I'm ashamed of them. So this is like first of all. The second thing is we should take into account that, look, even 2 months ago, the Palestinian prisoners were a big issue. It is not a big issue anymore. For Hamas now, the prisoners are less important, and the end of the war is more important. So in a way, if the only demand will be a long ceasefire, I think a majority of Israelis can digest it. It will be easier to digest this than to digest many people who killed and murdered Israelis go out of jail. So in a way, it works for Biden and for his attempt to bring some kind of a peace. And also the right-wing Israeli politicians are waiting for Trump. I don't think we should run away from this. They are hoping that if Trump is instead of Biden in less than 1 year, then also right-wing Israeli politics will be easier to digest for the Americans. So if we look 1 or 2 years from now, it is a big question who will win the American elections.
Okay, very interesting. Ambassador Goel, this is of course quite interesting. While the American elections may still be 9 months away, the right-wingers in Israel are already hoping for a Trump win. What do they think will happen if Trump comes back to the White House? Do they believe they will have a carte blanche to do what they like and the war can just go on and on?
Trump is in fact even more transactional than many other leaders have been really. Of course, Trump is also a businessman, and there is a lot really counting on Israel in terms of the business interests of Trump, and therefore I can quite understand that Trump, being a businessman with great deal of interest in Europe, etc., that he will play more according to what Israel's wish list is. But again, having seen Trump being what he is and how he reacts to situations, there are no guarantees. At least in case of Biden, one knew how he would react. One could really be more certain of his behavior than in the case of Trump. Therefore, all the best to Israel if they think Trump will be more favorable to them. But that aside, the whole situation is so different from when Trump was in power. Trump did not have to deal with a wartime Middle East. Today there is Saudi Arabia, oil interests are colliding. Red Sea, the shipping has become more expensive. Insurance money. There are so many imponderables here that I really cannot imagine whether Trump will put pressure on Israel to end the war so that his business can revert to being normal, that the oil interest can become normal again, or he will actually go by the book and stay with Israel. Difficult to say, very, very difficult. Sorry, I said in the beginning, the situation is such, this is getting more difficult really.
Yes, clearly. These are very tricky issues. Perhaps if I were in your place, I wouldn't want to stick my neck out either. But your perspective on Trump is, of course, quite interesting. And I agree with you, actually, that, you know, with Trump being Trump, there are no cast iron guarantees. No. You just don't know which way the man might go, what he might do. He is predictably unpredictable.
That's the only thing one can say about him. He's predictably unpredictable. Absolutely.
That's the only thing we can say with certainty about Donald Trump. So let me take this back to Anat. Anat, you know, while perhaps it is right-wingers like Ben-Gvir who are, you know, hoping to see Trump return to the White House, he said so quite openly. But at the end of the day, given the very strong ties that exist between the United States and Israel, and given that, largely there's been bipartisan support to this relationship, and President Biden, in all fairness, has withstood tremendous internal pressure to continue his unstinting support to Israel, while of course, Israel has been nudged every now and then by Antony Blinken and Lloyd Austin and others, and been told to do more to save civilian lives. Action has recently been taken against some Israeli settlers in the West Bank. But that apart, a little bit of nudging apart, there has been a lot of support from the Biden administration. At the end of the day, do you believe it really matters to Israel whether a Democrat is in the White House or a Republican?
It's a good question. I really don't know. I mean, if we go back and we look at Trump administration, let me remind everyone that he moved the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And that was a big step from the US to support Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. So Trump was good to Israel when he served as the president. When we look now, Biden is supporting Israel from day one, is a friend of Israel from not just from now, from being deputy to Obama and even from his days in the Congress. So I don't know to say whether the Democrats or the Republicans will be better. I think that the US, no matter who is in the head, is a true friend of Israel with common interests, with very good working groups and anti-terror and strategic alliance. So I don't know whether Trump will be better or Biden. Biden definitely support Israel 100%. From the fact that he reached Israel a few days after the attack and really gave support to the people, and a lot of, I would say that Biden's first talk in Israel was a game changer. It really gave confidence to the Israelis that were in shock in the first week of the war. And when we'll go and once we will learn the history, people will say that Biden changed the mindset of Israel from being in a shock to seeing that US continued the support. It was a major thing for Israel. And he continued till date. So Biden is good for Israel in the current situation. As you rightly said, I cannot predict Trump. He was good to Israel when he served as a president. I don't know about his agenda in the next administration. So it's not for me to say. I would say that US is an ally of Israel no matter what.
Well, I tend to agree with that. I think there has by and large been bipartisan support in the United States towards Israel, I guess especially in the wake of 7th of October. And it would be correct and fair to say that President Biden has staked his political capital in many ways on his support to Netanyahu and Israel's war in Gaza, in the face of tremendous pressure from within, even his own administration and, many in the Democratic Party who have continued to question Israel's war given the high death toll in Gaza. But Lev, what are your thoughts on this? Of course, Anat makes an interesting point that we would do well to remember that Trump was somebody who made the bold and controversial move, if I might say, when he took the decision to move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That had, of course, raised a lot of hackles. But at the same time, as Ambassador Goel says, Trump is a very unpredictable man. At the end of the day, he is a shrewd and astute businessman, and Trump does what suits Trump at the end of the day. Do you believe that whether you have Biden coming back to power or Trump could in any way have a significant impact on Israel-US ties?
I think it could, because, as you said, Biden is more predictable. So even if we get less, we know what we get. On the other hand, from Trump, we can get more. It is not only Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, it is also the Abraham Accords. And Trump helps Israel in the way that, there is a lot of double talk. A lot of the things that Israel is here in closed rooms, later on they are scolded in TV studios. So in a way, under Trump, we see less double talk. Trump says what he thinks. And the illusion, I think, among the right-wing Israel of today is that Trump will support each and every Israeli step. And it is an illusion because I don't think Trump will allow Israel to annex Gaza or the West Bank or any other step Israel will want to do if it will be under a right-wing coalition. Because for Trump, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates are not less important than Israel. As you said, he's a shrewd businessman. Israel is part of his business. It is not all his business.
Okay. Well, so I guess you do agree with Ambassador Goel when he says good luck to those Israelis who are hoping that Trump comes back to power and they will have a blank check to do whatever they want. With Trump, you can never be sure of anything at all. But the bigger question still remains, are we likely to see an end to this war that has now gone on for 4 long months? As I keep saying, just too many people have died already. The world is holding its breath and waiting to see an end to hostilities. Will we see a ceasefire taking effect? That remains a million-dollar question. And this is, of course, a story that we will continue to track closely on Global Lens, as we have done every single day since the 7th of October. On that note, Anant Bernstein, Lev Aaron and Ambassador Suresh Goel, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.